The summer we moved into the old house by the river, I learned to listen to the walls when they whispered. I was small enough to fit a handspan under the staircase, and I learned that every breath the house took belonged to someone else first. Someone long gone. Someone who remembered with a patient, unhurried longing that could still sound like rain on tin. The house wore its age with a careful vanity, varnish that glowed too warm in the lamplight. Doors that sighed open with the gentlest push of wind, and a front parlour where the carpet pooled its colour, as if the floor itself had decided it preferred a memory to a surface. My sister, Lila, was there with me for a while. No, longer, until she wasn't anymore. And that is where the trouble began, though we did not know it at the time. Our mother spoke softly of summer magic, the way the old house could be coaxed to tell one of its stories if you stood very still and believed loudly enough. She showed us a ritual learned from someone's grandmother. A circle of chalk on the floor, a small candle set in the centre, and a quiet promise to listen for a voice not your own if the river fog rose thick enough to blur the borders between rooms. We drew the circle near the doorway between the kitchen and the hall. Not a door we could actually pass through. A door we imagined would open when the house decided we were ready. We whispered the name of a friend we'd never lost, a girl who drifted in and out of our games with the erratic hush of a moth. Mara. We wrote Mara's name on pieces of scrap. We tucked her name into the seam of the wallpaper. We pressed small stones beneath the rug as if to anchor a dream. Mara was never seen in the daylight. Not after the first week. Not after the first night, when the house woke with a soft, measured breath, and the beans on the pantry shelf began to shiver, as though something unseen stirred behind the shelves to tidy them away. Mara fell away from the world of boys and girls, from the river of our summer, and yet she did not vanish so much as move into the house itself, the way a memory slips behind a doorframe and lingers there with its own quiet pulse. The first sound that should not have existed came on the third day. It was a tune, a music box tune that belonged to someone who had not been a part of our life, and yet it played with a stubborn insistence from the attic. It wasn't loud. It didn't persuade. It simply returned, again and again, a lullaby that could be heard through the ceiling, as if someone lay just beyond the floorboards and played it for the wind. We found no box, no mechanism, only dust motes that danced in the beam of sunlight, and a single note that trembled for a heartbeat and vanished. When I pressed my ear to the ceiling, I thought I heard Mara's name whispered with the breath of someone who knew you well and had forgotten nothing. In the afternoons, the house grew taller, longer. The stairwell smelled of rain, even when it hadn't rained. And if you stood with your back to the wall and listened, the house would settle into a slow, content sigh, as though it had finally admitted a guest had arrived and would stay. Mara began to appear in the house's corners in the pale blue of dusk, a child's figure with hair that caught the light, eyes too old and too young at once, a look of longing that lingered in the corners of the parlour until you could swear the furniture remembered her too. She never stepped fully into the room. She hovered at the edge of sight, a ghost with a heartbeat you could feel more than hear. We played the ritual sometimes only in the quiet of our own thoughts, and the circle grew faint, as though the chalk feared being drawn too boldly, as if the house might decide to erase it if given enough time. The walls themselves began to remember Mara, or perhaps Mara reminded the walls how to remember. The wallpaper showed new lines near the seam, where there was once only old patterning lines that looked almost like handwriting. as if someone had etched into the paper the script of a private letter meant only for the house to read. Mara's absence wounded the summer with a peculiar ache, something you could not name but could feel. If you spoke her name aloud, the room would tilt a fraction toward the corner where her figure flickered, and the lamp on the hall table would tremble with a small, tremulous flame, as if it remembered a voice it had once held close to its own. The more we spoke, the more the house began to answer, not in words, but in a cadence of small sounds. The careful tapping of a pencil against the windowsill, the soft scuff of a shoe behind the parlour chair. The year Mara disappeared, the river rose in a curious way, as if the water itself had learned to keep secrets by listening to the house. We were told it was a flood, then a storm, then simply luck that Mara was not found on the banks, how or where, or if she had ever fallen into the current. I was sent away for a night to keep from the fear that clung to the house like a damp shawl. When I returned, the attic door lay open with a faint, respectful invitation, as though Mara herself had chosen to call off the guards and permit a single breath of air in from the river. In the years that followed, the house kept Mara in a language of slow motions. I grew older and learned to live with the idea that the house needed someone to listen, and I became that someone. The circle was never broken, merely repurposed. The chalk dust settled into a pale map on the floor that never quite eroded, a map that pointed not to exits, but to the quiet places a child could hide when the fear of losing someone was larger than the fear of being found. The music box tune returning from the attic grew less a mystery and more a patient witness to a truth no one cared to admit aloud. Mara had not left us at all. She had learned to live inside the walls, to become a permanent impression on every room we entered. Decades later, I came back to the house a second time without warning, a necessity that had nothing to do with sentiment and everything to do with the need to know the truth the house refused to spell out with ordinary speech. The door to the attic was no longer an ordinary door, not a portal, but a threshold the house treated with a reverence I had not earned. The stairs breathed with a slower, more deliberate life, and at the top I found the hidden chamber the wallpaper had yawned open to reveal. A pale, almost clinical room with a chair, a desk, and a single window that looked out at nothing but the quiet of the river's reflected surface. On the desk lay Mara's things as if she had only stepped away for a moment. A faded ribbon, a chalk-dusted stone, and a notebook that